Well, viewers, for 2 consecutive days, there had been a convergence of authorities in the aviation industry all over the world. Stakeholders, regulators, enthusiasts, all converged here at Abuja Sheraton, brainstorming on RPAS. It is actually the event that is called RPAS Symposium and Workshop. And RPAS simply means Remotely Piloted Aircraft System. It is the in thing now, and stakeholders are saying, how do we get it right? What are the security implications? What are the commercial advantages? What value would such bring to the economy of every nation represented? So I have the pleasure of introducing you to 2017 hosting of RPAS Symposium and Workshop, the very first that's going to be held in Africa. I'm so happy that it's taking place here in Nigeria, and we say kudos to the Aviation Ministry and the regulatory authorities. Come along with me.
Africa's most populous economic powerhouse, Nigeria, continues to tuck away more and more feathers of achievement in a world quick on caution for adherence to best practices in all sectors of social and economic life. Some time ago, various endeavors deliberately undertaken by a country clearly moving in rhythm with calls and actions for total aviation safety shot Nigeria to level 3 alongside countries like the United States and Britain in terms of diligence in aviation. It was a thing of joy, a salute to conscious effort, and a recognition that nothing is unachievable by the mind that truly endeavors. It was similarly an occasion for professional contentment when Nigeria hosted the Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems RPAS Symposium, whose theme was Remotely Piloted Aviation in Africa, Sharing Experiences and Challenges. The event, which held at the Abuja Sheraton Hotel from 17th to 18th July 2017, was midwifed by the Federal Ministry of Transportation, Aviation Sector. It was a unique occasion for states, international organizations, and stakeholders to come together to examine the RPAS, their current status in Nigeria, and how best to tap into an area which technology virtually takes to a higher notch on a daily basis. Clearly, Africa and the Indian Ocean community would have a lot to take away from such a symposium in a spirited exchange of challenges to overcome and benefits to derive from the entry of the RPAS community into the civil aviation system. Participants were interested in aligning ongoing RPAS development and supporting regulatory framework. The 2-day event saw the Nigerian Minister of State Aviation Sector in the Ministry of Transportation, Senator Hadi Sirika, welcome the global attendance of the symposium. He mentions why good integration of RPAS in the Nigerian airspace is important.
I am particularly delighted because the symposium will be a remarkable opportunity to chart a new course for how issues of RPAS, otherwise known as unmanned air vehicles, or popularly called as drones, will be managed not only in Africa, but the world at large. Aviation has traditionally evoked images of pilots flying jetliners from one destination to the other. But today, a new picture is emerging of where aviators will stay on ground while aircraft as small as your hand defy gravity and take to the airspace. The growth of remotely piloted aircraft industry is one of the most exciting developments in transportation today.
Senator Sirika said the Nigerian aviation authorities would set up an aircraft safety group similar to the Civil Aviation Surveillance Team, whose role would mitigate any RPAS threats to aircraft, people and property.
Am I right to say that the essence of this symposium is your desire to wanting to get it right?
Absolutely correct, spot on. It's our desire to get it right, to share experiences of other countries and nations and other aviation industry around the continent of Africa and the world, to ensure that we're one house, one home, one industry and one aviation.
President of the Council of ICAO, Dr. Olumuyiwa Aliu, saw the flip side of the dynamic growth in various technological opportunities as the challenge of balancing safety and security with efficiency and sustainability. He says this is particularly relevant to the aviation environment. It is not without attendant responsibilities.
Although this will take ICAO well into the unusual arena of domestic operations, however, in engaging this work, we will help to facilitate earlier implementation of regulation for drones by states, common baselines for manufacturers to build to, and for operators large and small to duly comply with. In this regard, if you consider a company like Amazon, for example, which presently is envisaging a global drone fleet to enhance its deliveries, the value of having a potential myriad of domestic regulations aligned via globally harmonized international standards becomes clearly apparent.
The Secretary General, African Aviation Commission, Mrs. Iyabo Sosina, recognized the various needs remotely piloted aircraft systems are servicing in the present day. She warns about risks in their uncontrolled usage, but also recognizes the huge potentials that are inherent in safe deployment of RPAS.
The integration of RPAS into the current air traffic management system will, like any new event, need to be assessed with regards to the safety of the operations in accordance with the provisions of Annex 11 on air traffic services. For this reason, I wish to invite the African aviation community to steer clear of rejecting the growing RPAS and UAS activities in Africa, as this should not be viewed as threats to the safety of the current air navigation operations. Rather, RPAS should be treated just as any new type of aircraft which require suitable regulations based on the risk assessment of each operation.
Founder Dronamics, Zvilen Rangelov, addresses the need for efficiency in air cargo transportation and foresees more cargo carrying unmanned aircraft in the future. He advises investment in this direction.
We know that everywhere around the world, even in developing markets and especially in developing markets, the growth of e-commerce is a big driver for this. Parcels are very easy to be automated. Why? Because they're not passengers, so they are, they don't have a preference whether there's a pilot on board or not. Obviously, us as passengers, we would have such a preference. So all this talk about flying taxis, I think we'll have to wait first to be proven with packages.
When a good is to be transported from point A to point B, when it gets to the airport, I believe they are being checked. Do you have any process in place now, or are you already considering to monitor the goods that have been moved from point A now to point B without having to go through the airports, just like you said, you explained earlier?
By the way, this this is an excellent point that you're making, that the actual checks happen at the airport. They don't happen at point A, which should direct you again to the trucking industry, where the barriers to entry are much lower, regulations are much different, and then that's where goods are most likely to spoil or to be intercepted or just be tampered with. So by eliminating a big part of the chain being going on the ground, you also eliminate this lack of transparency, and this is why, in our view, this model would be an improvement over the current situation.
Director, Africa Affairs Council, Ms. Bonnie Debate, wants prompt certification of the safety profile of any system making its way into air traffic as a necessary precaution. It's all designed to make RPAS an asset, not a burden.
In terms of ANSPs, our requirements for RPAS are: air traffic management integration of RPAS will be safely achieved when routine access by RPAS operations into non-segregated airspace is integrated into air traffic services providers. Therefore, the remote pilot will be required to respond to ATS guidance or requests for information and comply with the ATC instruction, e.g. fly headings, altitudes, nav aids, waypoints, etc. Comply with standard IFR approach and procedure and departure procedure in the same way and within the same time frame as the pilot of a manned aircraft.
For her part, ICAO RPAS Program Manager, Ms. Leslie Carey, outlines how ICAO is not sacrificing safety for the benefits of using the unmanned aircraft. And later, in a one-on-one interview, she again welcomes the drone into the airspace, but makes a point of not letting the gains come with unpleasant incidents.
Traditionally, we understood aviation. It was really quite a romantic idea, the concept of getting on board an airplane and flying to another country. But now, looking at this latest technology, which can involve a small drone, maybe weighing 1 or 2 kilos, and with that small drone, we have potential to do all sorts of things that we never considered before. And we need everybody to understand, both these new operators getting involved, what their role is, because they are now joining aviation. They're a part of the aviation system, and they need to understand the rules. They need to understand safe operations, what their aircraft can do, which is both good and bad. Exactly. It can be a hazard to other aircraft, and we're sure that they don't mean that to be the case. But if operated inappropriately, they are a hazard. So we need them to understand how to operate safely, where to operate safely, and then say, go do it.
People say drones are reshaping the aviation industry. And I want to say, aviation industry does not need to be reshaped. It is shaped. And I've got an article from the FAA that says fly a drone next to a stadium or a controlled airspace, you're going to jail. And I think I like that. They need to be sent to jail.
As a representative of South Africa on the Council of ICAO, laid the ground for the next stage of the huge effort to integrate unmanned aerial vehicles in African skies without much incident. It had become obvious the extent of the conscious commitment these participants had gathered in Abuja to forge.
The beautiful thing that has happened in Africa now is that Africa has reached what we call a zero accidents, and this is putting Africa on the limelight. So we want to make sure nothing endangers the safety of civil aviation in Africa. So the regulation that must be put in place to ensure that the RPAS are effectively and efficiently regulated so that we do not have accidents in Africa.
When it got to the turn of Nigerian Airports Management Authority NAMA MD Captain Fola Akinkyotu, there was emphasis that the symposium was not engaged in activity to inhibit the use of unmanned aerial vehicles. The continuing focus is to address the concerns raised by the rising profile of remotely piloted aircraft systems, RPAS, an assignment the symposium was bent on giving all that was required to achieve purpose.
In our aviation industry today, safety and security are closely interlinked. And we have also cases of security concern with the use of RPAS, mostly in the areas where they can be used maliciously, and the potential threat also of drone carrying and delivering explosives possible, uses of drone to endanger aircraft or airport, that is still possible, and the cyber threats and hazards that comes with all these security threats. They are threats that we are lightening, and then they are not just to discourage the use of RPAS, no, not at all, but we're just enlightening them so that we can jointly look at how to use our airspace, taking those concerns into consideration. Then another area of concern that we bring forward is the access to airspace. The potential of enhanced separation standard to apply to RPAS operation is there before us that we need to consider. We need also to look at the negative consequences of related to the airspace efficiency, capacity, which we already have, are restricted areas to accommodate the airspace.
As the lively parley continued in the hall, Courtney Robinson of Aerospace Industries Association was asked what he thought about discussions such as this.
Could you tell us the quick wins of the session you moderated? What summary would you give it?
What really we focused on was the infrastructure needed to support UAS, and that includes networks, communications networks, the spectrum that they will require, and also the rules and regulations that need to be in place that will point to standards that will make the integration of RPAS into airspace in Nigeria and other African countries work more seamlessly, deliver greater safety, and therefore more quickly societal benefits to the people.
Thank you, Courtney. We're talking of RPAS in Nigeria. What is the scenario in the United States?
Well, in the United States, it's very interesting because we already have a lot of infrastructure for aviation, but it is older infrastructure. In some ways, the countries that are seen as less developed, because they don't have this old infrastructure in place, they can start more fresh and anew faster. So in the United States with UAS, our Federal Aviation Administration, the agency that I worked for some years ago, has put in place just last year rules called Part 107 that are allowing operations of small UAS, RPAS, as they're termed internationally, to operate as long as they're below 55 pounds, operate during daytime hours, and there are some other criteria to fit that. Yes, well regulated, but it is a first step. It's just for the small ones, and it will be very incremental steps so that aircraft that are larger and systems that are more complex will be able to enter the airspace in the coming years.
The trip from Canada to Nigeria for the symposium was one ICAO technical officer, Cliff Sweet, cherished completely. When it came to re-expressing purpose, he was equally expressive.
RPAS technology, RPAS stands for Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems. Currently, the RPAS section is developing standards and recommended practices for those aircraft, or for those, we call them RPAs, or Remotely Piloted Aircraft, and then the S is a system, that's the ground control system. So currently we're developing standards and recommended practices, we call those SARPs. for the operation and ultimately integration of RPAS into the air traffic management system.
Here's a short take on existing regulations guiding the use of remotely piloted aircraft systems, RPAS. The Symposium and Workshop at Abuja Sheraton Hotel was a gathering that sought safe skies for aviation in the midst of the rising profile of unmanned aerial vehicles, or to use the more international term, remotely piloted aircraft systems, RPAS. It was an occasion that advanced that little further, efforts to ensure that regulators do not sit idly by and watch calamity result from what is clearly an exciting technology. The drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, and to be more international, remotely piloted aircraft systems, RPAS, are growing in number. So is the amount of care that needs to be injected into what happens between when they take off and land. Safety is the word as more and more people and organizations key into the benefits of RPAS. And for Nigeria, it was yet another opportunity to identify with international best practices in an era when globalization can no longer be ignored. At the global level, ICAO, a UN specialized agency which manages the administration and governance of the Convention on International Civil Aviation, has left its footprints again on the path to total technology appreciation, side-by-side safety concerns in the relevant environment. All's well that ends well. The Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Transportation expresses appreciation for a laudable event.
We hope and assure you that this symposium will be for the benefit of humanity. The remotely piloted aircraft system should and must be for the benefit of humanity and not for anything short of that. And I assure you that all the issues discussed here will be used for our own regulations to ensure that we have used this for the benefit of everybody.
That the outcomes of these symposium will form part of what we would use in trying to regulate the uses of drones. And regulation will be very friendly regulation. It won't be such that it will kill the enthusiasm and the quest for knowledge and the applications of RPAS. And that is given as far as we are concerned in the ministry.
Well, viewers, this is where we call it today. It's been exciting, incisive, educative, and enlightening to me, and I hope it's been to you. I've learned a great deal from the workings of the aviation sector. For the past 2 days, we've been at the Abuja Sheraton, Federal Capital Territory, bringing you the 2017 RPAS Symposium and Workshop. A lot of stakeholders from all over the world, from America, from Europe, from Africa, from Far East Asia, converged here to brainstorm on getting the workings and the regulatory framework of RPAS right. How do we get to ensure that this doesn't pose a threat to security of lives and property? And so we've had it all today from the conference. I've been your regular anchor, Omote Omotosho, and I found it very, very enlightening. Thanks for joining us. Next week poses to be a very, very interesting program yet again. We say a big kudos to the entire aviation ministry in Nigeria, led by the minister himself, Hadi Sirika, and his entire team. Of course, a big kudos as well to NCAA and all the members of staff. Everybody have been working day in, day out to ensuring that this workshop and symposium turns out to be a huge success. And by virtue of the turnout, it's indeed a huge success. Thanks for joining us. God bless you. Good night.